So we are recording. Yes, we are recording. So hello, everyone. This is the University of Mount Olive, the Tillman School of Business. And tonight we have a team of MBA candidates who are ready to receive their degrees. And just prior to doing so, they are obliged to bring to you their discussion of the Toyota, yes, and its international strategy. And with that, I am going to turn over to the moderator, who will be Beth Mancuso Mills, and that will take me just a minute. And at this point, Beth, you are now the host. You can go ahead at this point. You're in charge. You can flip the slides.
Okay. Okay, can everybody see my slides?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Introduction.
Chelsea.
So tonight, myself, Chelsea Jones, Jetta Knight, Beth Mancuso Mills, Karen McLean, and Gabrielle Ramirez will be discussing the strategic analysis that we've done over the past 6 to 7 weeks on Toyota Motor Company, better known as Toyota.
First, a little bit about the background and mission. But first, a little bit of history. The first major turning point in Toyota's history is its founding and entry into the automobile industry. That started in 1933 when Kichiro Toyota, the son of the founder of Toyota Automatic Loom Works, started a division of the company specifically to produce automobiles. In 1937, that division finally became an independent company, the Toyota Motor Company. Another significant event to note during this time point was World War II, because Japan's conflict with China made it difficult for Toyota to enter the Chinese market for automobiles. The next significant turning point is establishing of a brand identity. In 1957, Toyota finally entered the American market with the Crown model. 1961 and 63, Toyota introduced total quality control and then adopted the Kanban method. In 66 and 70, Toyota began to market the Corolla and then later launched the Celica. By the 1980s, the Corolla was one of the best-selling cars in the world. The next major turning point was becoming a global corporation. In 1984, Toyota entered into a joint venture with General Motors. This was called the New United Motor Manufacturing, Inc., or NUMMI. NUMMI allowed Toyota to learn about American markets and establish new brands, including their luxury division, Lexus. In the late 1990s, Toyota formed Toyota Motor Europe and Engineering. Another base was later set up in the United Kingdom. In 1997, with the launch of the Prius, Toyota became the first automobile manufacturer to commercially mass produce and sell a hybrid vehicle. That takes us to Toyota's next turning point, making steps towards future mobility. In 2002, Toyota began a program to test the Toyota FCHV, a hybrid hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. And I don't have to read all of these bullet points, but another significant one to note was that in 2010, Toyota began a collaboration with Tesla Motors to create electric vehicles. In 2014, Toyota revealed the Mirai, its first hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, sold commercially. By 2015, retail sales of that vehicle began in the United States. And by 2020, Toyota plans to introduce vehicles that have the ability to drive themselves on the highways.
So this is a representation of Toyota's products. Not surprisingly, they're all vehicles. To note on this slide is that of their many different types of models, sedans, sports cars, minivans, trucks, crossovers, and then their luxury division of Lexus, the asterisk cars are available in hybrid versions. That will come up later in the future as that is the direction that transportation is going. Next slide, please. Here is the international brands that aren't sold locally that we may not be accustomed to. And highlighted here are the brands that are sold in China. China is a huge market, and we wanted to emphasize their presence in China with the vehicles that they sell in China. Next slide, please.
So our mission statement, and I'm just going to highlight the points in the mission statement. Toyota is a leader in the transportation and mobility industry. They provide high quality vehicles, and they're committed to hard work to develop innovative processes and highly skilled workers that are required to manufacture these safe, fuel efficient, and environmentally friendly vehicles. The vision statement, again, you can read this on your own, but we are leading the world in transportation and mobility, and we are looking to manufacturing state-of-the-art mobility solutions with cutting edge technologies that outperform all other competitors. So, okay, what about Abel's model? And so the market that we serve is North America and Japan are the principal markets, and the population is the young adult to middle-aged adult. The needs of the segment is safe vehicles, fuel-efficient vehicles, and affordable vehicles. Some of the competencies that are required to meet those needs are highly skilled workers, efficient manufacturing processes, and product design engineering.
Now we get into the economics section. 4 slides are going to pop up, or 4 graphs are going to pop up on here. First top left is the GDP. You can see China has the largest GDP in the world. And in 2013, they surpassed the US. In 2015, they surpassed the European Union. Also to note on this slide is that China and India have the fastest growing rate of GDP of all the countries. On the next slide on the right, top right, is the GDP per capita. Obviously, you can see that USA is leading in that area, that we have the most consumption potential. But to note on this slide is that India and China have a rapidly increasing consumption potential as well. The GDP saving rate is included on here because that is going to show how much capital the countries have to reinvest in their country. That will become more pertinent here in a couple slides, but that just means that they have more money to reinvest in their country. China and India have the highest on this slide, on that graph. The inflation graph here of note is that as inflation rises, the cost of commodities rise. So that means they don't have any money for discretionary items to spend on like vehicles or luxury items. Brazil on here is highly fluctuating. It shows instability in their economy. China has a relatively low inflation rate, but because the government controls their money and their monetary system, it's not that reliable. India is high, but has relatively decreased over time. So that means that they are starting to gain more money to spend on discretionary items. Next slide, please. This shows population unemployment rate and roads. Roads are important because cars drive on roads. So first we'll start with the population on the top left. The population there is India and China. That shows how much India is growing and how China is slightly decreasing in their population. That just shows that there's more people in India and that there's more people to sell to in India, and China is slowly decreasing. The unemployment rate on the right shows for Brazil that they have a high unemployment rate. That means they have a large workforce that can be employed. And most notably here, we have on the bottom the roadways. So the road map on the bottom left shows that the US and Japan are pretty saturated with paved roads. That means there's not much growth for the roads, and as opposed to China, Brazil, very notably, and India. On the bottom right is their paved road per capita, which again shows that the United States has more paved roads per capita, and Japan has more paved roads per capita, and that China and India and Brazil have growth potential in those areas. Next slide, please. This shows the exchange rate of the companies we have been looking at. And to note, the euro on the top left, how many dollars the euro can buy. So it's different from the other graphs.
Good.
The biggest thing to note on these graphs is that as the dollar can buy more of the company's currency, or the country's currency, the more eager you should be to switch currencies from that country to the dollar. As it decreases, you're going to want to hold on to that money because you can make more money selling it as it increases. Next slide, please. This shows automobile loans. And the top left is the total dollar amount of loans in the US, and it shows that it's stable to rising. On the bottom right, it shows that the automobile loan interest rate has dropped off and is currently rising. Next slide, please. That previous slide is important to show that the sales in the top left have risen as the interest rates have decreased, and now it's starting to go down as the interest rates are increasing. So the bottom slide shows that total vehicle sales is relatively stable, and the previous slide showed that the amount spent on automobiles has been increasing, but that is due to the fact that it costs more to buy a vehicle because of the rising interest rates. Next slide, please. So what are the conclusions from all that? Well, we find that China has the largest GDP in the world, the United States has the largest consumption potential, but that India and China have the fastest rising consumption potential. India's population growth is decreasing, but India's is increasing. It also shows that Toyota is dependent on international sales. If you go back to the slides, Japan does not have any growth in roads or roadways. They're physically limited because they are an island. China has the biggest market, yet from the history, we have a disadvantage culturally to enter there. European Union is 28 countries, yet very similar to the US. That just kind of makes them a whole conglomerate of countries, whereas the US is just one. Inflation, we went over that part. The desirability of doing business in South America, which we presented Brazil as, is not very likely because of the instability of their economy, shown on the inflation slide. And then all of that comes to our conclusion that China is the growth market of the present and India is the growth market of the future. Porter's diamond model. So Porter's diamond analysis shows the economic support of the industry in question for the country we are looking to enter. The factor conditions are land, labor, capital, raw materials, technical knowledge, managerial attributes, and infrastructure. Demand conditions are the competitive advantages gained for the home country by having the demand locally. Supporting industries are those that exist in those countries to support the industry that we're taking. So like raw materials, steel, aluminum to make cars. Rivalry is based on an inverted U, where too little competition means that quality is sacrificed, and too high competition means that profit margins are sacrificed. So if we go to the next slide, please. This is a graphical representation of the numbers that were on the previous slide. So to note here is that Brazil has low factor conditions because they have a very weak infrastructure. If you remember from the roads graph, they don't have many paved roads, they have a lot of unpaved roads. So their infrastructure is highly lacking. Brazil has less than ideal rivalry because they don't have a large domestic manufacturing, large domestic automobile manufacturing business. China has high factor conditions because they have a strong labor force because of their population, and they have a high GDP savings rate, which means that even though in the other slide where the roads, they had a lot of growth potential, they have the money to invest in growing those paved roads. That is the same with India. India has a high capital to invest in the roads that they're lacking. So they have demand conditions that can be favorable. Rivalry factors in China and in India are ideal because they do have an automobile manufacturing industry. While India's doesn't quite correlate to what Toyota products are, they still have that there. So they're more ideal. USA is high. They have Ford, GM, Chrysler, which are present in the global market. And that is where we rate those people. Next slide, please.
All right, so here we'll be focusing on market drivers and some of the things that impact the auto industry. Before we get into that, I would like to show you some of the auto sales from 1990 to 2019. Here, I want everyone to kind of realize that the sales in the automobile industry have kind of stabilized. In 2017, it went up, and the study was done from 2018, and it was expected to drop a little bit and remain steady throughout 2019. Next slide. All right, so these are some of the sales by region in 2019, and it's important to note that the sales in North America were about 50% less than the sales in China. So overall, it was about 20% of the total automobile sales. And with that being said, the U.S. does have an impact on the automobile industry, but it's not as large of an impact as we as Americans tend to think. Next slide, please. All right, so these are the sales by 2018. If you look in the fourth column where it says year, it just shows the difference between 2017 and 2018. And here I want everyone to notice that China has decreased, India has increased. The other countries have remained the same. Next slide, please. All right, so population definitely has an impact on the automobile sales. Of course, the more people there are, the more automobile sales you expect to be. So China and India are well into 1.3 and 1.4 billion, while the US, Japan, and Germany have been between 300 million and 350 million. And if you look very closely, you can see, I'm sorry, could you go back for a second? If you look very closely, you can see that Japan's population has been decreasing and India has been increasing rapidly. Next slide, please. And with that being said, India is expected to catch up to China within the next 3 years. And as the population increases, you can expect to see an increase in automobile sales. With Japan decreasing slowly due to economic conditions, you can expect to see a decline in automobile sales. Next slide, please. Age also has an important factor of the automobile sales. You can expect to see some younger drivers looking for more sporty cars, muscle cars, while some of our older drivers are more interested in safety and other features such as, and that does have a direct impact on the sales and other factors such as marketing and who they will market to. Next slide, please. So we noted before that sales were consistent, steady, or in some areas even dropping. So there has to be a reason behind that, and something that I noticed while looking it up was public transportation. A lot of cities are beginning to urbanize, and as they urbanize, they depend a lot on public transportation or ride sharing, which is Uber and Lyft. As Gabe explained in one of the first slides, and the interest rates have been increasing, and as interest rates increase, it becomes a bit more expensive and difficult to own a car. In 2018, in March of 2018 specifically, some of the interest rates were the highest they had ever been, and that you could expect to see auto sales to be the lowest they had ever been. Especially in some of our larger cities, owning a car is no longer a necessity, and there's plenty of people migrating to some of these larger cities. So owning a car is no longer convenient for them, and it's pretty costly when you think of things like parking it monthly or parking it daily for careers. Next slide, please. All right, so here we just show who is using public transportation the most. And if you look at the graph, you will see secondary school, which is college and stuff like that, full-time and part-time students and full-time workers who are using public transportation the most. And in these large cities such as New York, LA, and even some areas in China, you would expect to see these people not owning vehicles because they rely so heavily on public transportation due to the high expenses of owning a vehicle. Next slide, please. All right, so here it talks about vehicle saturation. Vehicle saturation refers to how many cars are in the home. So if you live in a home where there's 4 licensed drivers, if there's 4 cars there, then it's considered to be motor vehicle saturated. So here we can see that most full-time students and full-time workers are homes where they have no motor vehicles due to the use of public transportation. Therefore, they're not in homes that are motor vehicle saturated. And even when people are in homes that are motor vehicle saturated, about 20 to 30% of them are still relying on public transportation. And it's important to keep, with looking at these charts, it's important to keep in mind that urbanization is taking place, and so many smaller cities are beginning to urbanize things, daily activities that include public transportation. So these numbers are expected to increase as urbanization continues to take place. Next slide, please. So with urbanization increasing and the use of public transportation increasing, it's common to see a decline in automobile sales. So if you look at the 2 pie charts on the screen here, you'll see in 1983, a little less than half of 16-year-old drivers had a driver's license. Fast forward to 2014, about a quarter of them had driver's license. Next slide, please. All right, so this pie chart refers to 19-year-olds. Almost all 19-year-olds had a driver's license in 1983. And fast forward to 2014, it looks like a little over 25% do not have driver's license. In 2014, 16.4% of 20 to 24-year-olds had less driver's license. Compared to 1983, 11% of 25 to 29-year-olds, 10.3 to 30 to 34-year-olds, 7.4 to 30 to 39-year-olds, and for 40 to 54, the decline was less than 5%. Next slide, please. All right, so if you recall on the very first slide, the second slide where it showed the decrease, the sales in China had gone down roughly 2% compared to 2017. So it's common to question why those sales have been going down. Between the US and Europe and China and Russia, there have been tariffs and sanctions, and a lot of those sanctions have been on steels, and steels produce cars. So it's a direct impact to the car sales. Still during the sanction, China had increased the percentage of imported vehicles from 15% to 40%. Despite them increasing the amount of vehicles they imported, the sales had fallen for the first time in so many years. So the question there is, why are the sales decreasing if they're importing so many more cars? China refused to release certain American-made vehicles, more specifically the Mercedes-Benz, due to certain safety concerns. And we use safety concerns very loosely. These safety concerns are not real concerns. It's just a little tactic between China and USA to prevent them from selling American-made vehicles. Next slide, please. All right, something else that impacts the automobile industry is gas prices. As gas prices begin to drop, you can see a rise in automobile sales, and more specifically, when they're lower, you'll see an increase of truck sales or SUV sales. When gas prices are higher, you see a higher increase of smaller cars like your Prius and other eco-friendly cars. Next slide, please. All right. So with technology and a lot of changes to the automobile industry going forward, we can expect to see how oil prices and gasoline will affect the market. Within the last couple of years, EV, better known as electrical vehicles, have become more popular. And as they begin to become far more popular over the next couple of years, it's a possibility that they will disrupt the gas prices and auto sales correlations. It's something that we want to pay attention to if we continue to do strategic analysis. While electric vehicles can help improve the fuel economy and lower costs, the cost of electric vehicles is currently higher, but it is offset by not having to pay for gas. As the volume increases of the electric vehicles, prices are expected to drop. Therefore, there won't be as much as an offset. Next slide, please. All right, so this graph represents EV sales in the US over 2017, 2018. And the rise and drop of EV sales can be a result of gas prices. So when gas prices are higher, we can expect to see higher sales in electric vehicles. If you look at the red line in 2018, gas prices were higher compared to the prices in 2017. And here, electric vehicles were also higher, but it's kind of hard to say if it was due to the gas prices or if it was due to electric vehicles becoming more popular. Next slide, please. All right, so charging stations, or the availability of charging stations, definitely has an impact on EV sales. As you can see, China is definitely leading in the number of charging stations that they have. So therefore, charging station sales, electric vehicle sales in China would definitely be higher than any other area. They had 62, or they increased 62% of electric vehicle sales compared to 2017. In the United States, the United States roughly increased 4,000 vehicles in January 2019 in comparison to 2018. Next slide, please. All right, so after the Great Recession in 2009, we did see quite a bit of automobile sales increase, and the U.S. Toyota sales president, Bob Carter, he thought the industry had reached its peak, but there can be more opportunity. And here we can see the opportunity comes in threes. So if you notice these little lovely three-wheel vehicles at the top, specifically the Tata or Mahindra and Mahindra, these are what they are using in India. Due to road conditions, the economy, the price of vehicles is very popular over there. So this would be an opportunity for any automobile industry, specifically Toyota, since that's who we're doing our project on, to increase their market in India, or their presence in India. It would be a great opportunity for Toyota to go over there and partner with a company such as Mahindra and Mahindra, and they could help Mahindra and Mahindra with their process or their manufacturing, while Mahindra and Mahindra helps them market in India. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the automobile market is dependent upon multiple factors such as age group trends, economic trends, GDP per capita, steel prices and sanctions, international trade relations, cultural, and many other factors. After the Great Recession, sales increased, and people were finding they were able to afford cars again. So that will be a direct correlation right there. Over the past couple of years, sales have not been increasing, or they have only been steady, and China's economic growth has declined. As urbanization increases, owning a car is not so important. Moving forward, we can see a lot of self-driving cars, electric engines, and improved technology. So we can expect to see car sales increasing as they become more affordable, safer, and convenient. New technology can also shift the auto trends, but estimations can vary by location or technological improvements. Next slide, please.
Jetta, do you know that your microphone is turned off?
Oh, sorry, I thought it was on. So the most valuable auto companies, as you can see, and this is based on high sale and operating profit margins. So number 1 is Toyota, number 2 is Volkswagen, and 3 is Daimler. Next slide. And these, you'll see Toyota's biggest competitors here, and there will be another slide after this that talks about the world competitors, and that'll show again. But again, the biggest competitors right now are Daimler, Ford, and GM, and Honda. Next slide.
So this is for 2018 sales and operating margins for Toyota versus their major rivals. With the biggest takeaway from this is Toyota far out in front of the pack for sales, leading all of their rivals here. And then the operating margin, with the exception of the very sporty Ferrari, Toyota is still near the front of the pack as far for operating profit margins. For return on investments and leverage. So Toyota is doing pretty well with leverage. They are in that sweet spot, that just right between 30 and 40%. So they are doing very well on that as well. And then return on investments, that could be better, as we'll get into moving forward. And, you know, Ferrari's just way out in front up there. They're kind of an outlier, but Toyota's still towards the front of the pack in ROI as well. So the financial report card for 2018, we'll go through, let's see, Toyota, of course, is the world's largest auto producer, followed by VW. So they have the highest sales. GM has the highest operating margin, followed by Tata. The Toyota's margin is still relatively high, but we'll get into why they can go better. Currently, so this is 2018, right? So Volkswagen's return on investment is the industry highest, followed by Fiat. The Ford has the highest leverage, followed by General Motors. Toyota's leverage is relatively low, which is good, but it's not too low. And overall, Toyota's financial condition is very strong, with high sales and profit margins, complemented by low financial risk, as represented by their just right leverage. We'll see that Toyota's ROI will needs improvement going forward.
So one of the biggest rivals that Toyota has is in China. China has several joint ventures, as you'll see listed here, and they produce a lot of automobiles over there. One of the biggest groups that are in China is FAW and SAIC. Next slide. Another big rival for Toyota is India, and Tata Motors is the largest automobile company in India. and they occupy the #1 position in the commercial car segment. And as we talked about earlier, their three-wheelers are the automobile that is really doing well there. And they sold probably over about maybe 4 million vehicles, or I'm sorry, they have produced about 4 million vehicles in India. Next slide. The biggest rivals in the US are General Motors, Ford Motor Company, Chrysler, and Toyota. Toyota is very big in the United States as well, and as well as these are some of the largest automakers in the United States. So this was the slide I was referring to, the World War of Autos. So Toyota has competition in the United States with Ford and GM, in Europe with VW, Fiat, Peugeot, and Renault, in China, VW, GM, and Mitsubishi, in Japan, Toyota, Honda, and Mitsubishi, and Korea, Hyundai, and Kia. Next slide. So this is stages in the industry life cycle of the automobile industry. And, you know, as we know, in the embryonic stage, that's when things are just being developed. And so the fuel cell battery car would fall into that category. And then in between the embryonic and growth, moving up into growth, are the hybrids. And that's really when, in this stage, that demand is decreasing. And so hybrids are becoming in demand because, you know, they're fuel efficient, you know, they're environmentally safe, and so they fit into this category. And then between the growth and the shakeout, it's the pickup truck. And, you know, during the shakeout, normally you have the growth starts to slow down a little bit, and so they're kind of saturated. So at one time, you know, pickup trucks were a big thing, but again, you know, once with the gas prices, that demand went down. And the same thing with the luxury sedans and the sedans between the shakeout and mature, because people are really, you know, like the Toyotas or just regular sedans, like say Corolla, maybe an Accord. They're in the mature stage, and during that mature stage, the growth is slowing down really. And then of course on the decline are those big SUVs and what we consider the gas guzzlers. So this is just for the automobile industry. Next slide. So here's the BCG matrix for the industry. So the stars were the small pickup trucks and small SUVs, the ventures, which were the hybrids, and the fuel cell vehicles, which, you know, were in that embryonic stage. And then the cash cows were the small vehicles and sedans, and then the dogs being the minivans and the crossovers. Next slide. And so there's the industry BCG matrix by country. So the stars right near China, because they're manufacturing a lot of cars. And of course, the ventures are going to be in India with the new three-wheelers, and perhaps other industries going over there to try to partner with them to help with that. The cash cows, of course, are in the US and Europe, and then the dogs are in Japan. Next slide. So for the 5 forces analysis for Porter's model, this is where we're just analyzing the competitive forces. And so for the rivalry among existing firms is strong, the bargaining power of buyers is strong, the threat of new entrants is weak, the threat of substitute products or services is moderate, and the bargaining power of suppliers are weak. And the next slide will show some of the reasons for these conclusions. So for bargaining powers of buyers, It's low switching costs, high quality of information. For suppliers, there's high overall supply. For the threat of substitutes, it's low switching costs and there's moderate availability of substitutes. And the threat of new entrants, it's hard to enter this market because of the high capital costs. And then the rivalry among existing firms is due to the high aggressiveness and high variety and differentiation of firms. Next slide. So there are a lot of industry technology trends in the automobile. Mainly you have the electric car here, you have the luxury sedan, and you have the ride sharing such as Uber. And so some of the other trends in the automobile industry include fully electric vehicles, luxury vehicles, like I said in the first slide, taxi type services, innovating shared mobility for individual customers, low cost and efficient transportation. Other things that are trending, other notable trends include 3D printing, which is used in manufacturing, connectivity, electrification, and a lot of companies now are also outsourcing a lot of things like their parts design and manufacturing. And last, we have, next slide, our critical success failure factors. So what separates the winners from the losers? So these are really just our critical success factors. So product development. Toyota is known for their lean manufacturing, their Kanban and Kaizen processes, design engineering, international marketing, distribution channels, and integrated supply chain.
Okay, so Toyota's financial trends, covering years 2009 to 2018. Clear, good increase in sales over that time period. Return on investments and return on equity are all look good. And then I want to focus on operating profit margins with these slides. So you'll notice that there's a slight decrease from 2009 to 2011, a sharp increase through 2013, and then another decline through 2016. And there are some events that could be related to that. So if you recall, there were 2009 to 2010, decline could have been due to the safety concerns, where there were recalls, so it halted production and sales. In 2011, drop in Tohoku, the earthquake and the tsunami, so natural disasters, right? So they dropped also production and the exports during that time. So there's so they bounded back from that. And then, so there's a decline from 2013 to 2016 related to the exchange rates, and a decrease in the foreign auto retail sales. And there was a graph that at the beginning of our slide for foreign auto sales as related to the US. And then in 2014, Toyota announced it was going to cut its spare parts prices, which affects the operating margin. And it was going to cut it up to 35%. And that's in response to China's new policies as regards to spare parts prices. 2015, Toyota announced investment in artificial intelligence. 2016, Toyota invested in Uber. In 2018, Toyota announced investment in Uber's autonomous cars. So some of the events that directly relate to the operating margin of Toyota. And this is, so we have long-term debt, equity, capital, leverage. So leverage, again, we're in the sweet spot, decreased over the last 10 years, since 2009, which is good. Long-term debt did increase, and so some of those are the investments that they've made since 2011 in some of the changing industry trends. So financial trends conclusions, there's a steady increase in sales since 2009, which of course is post the Great Recession. There's an increase in operating margin from 2011 to 2013 and a subsequent decrease from 2013 to 2016 related to the exchange rates. And the other items, since 2011, capital and equity have steadily increased, and leverage decreased from 40.4% in 2009 to the 35% mark in 2018, indicating a moderate to low financial risk for Toyota. With a moderate to low financial risk, Toyota can be more aggressive strategically in the market.
All right, so we have Toyota's BCG matrix. Their stars are their best-selling models, which is the Camry and Corolla. Their ventures, the 8.6 is their new rendition of their sports car. If you're my age, you remember the Supra. This is kind of their reinvention of it. Supra was a very popular sports car in the 90s and early 2000s. They also have the Mirai in their ventures. That is their fuel cell gas-independent car. Actually, just a little side note, that car comes with 3 years free of hydrogen fuel, which there aren't many of those stations around, so that's why it's an adventure. The Cash Cows is their luxury brand. So they got Lexus, that GS model there is their highest selling Lexus model, and Highlander, which is their representation of the light truck SUV car. Of note, before Dr. Rooney interrupts me, the Prius is not on here. The Prius is the highest selling electric or hybrid car. So it could be a star. And the only reason I bring this up is because going forward, this is going to become more important. However, Prius is a hybrid car, so it could be a venture. Prius also has been around since 1997 and steadily held top sales. So it could be a cash cow. So if we had a big, huge diagonal Prius, it could fit in all three of those categories. But I didn't want to leave it out because it is important for that hybrid technology. And next slide.
Okay, so here we have our CSF report
Chelsea.
card. Yes.
So let me interrupt. Can we go back one slide? The one thing we didn't point out is that Toyota doesn't have any dogs. And that's a big thing.
All right. So here we have our CSF report card focusing on 5 different parts that are important to the multiple brands across the top. As we can see, Toyota has the highest rating for capabilities in the auto industry, followed by Volkswagen, Volkswagen including Porsche and Audi. Ford is vulnerable to attack due to its weak financial condition. They actually have the lowest financial condition of the brands up there. Toyota has done great across the board, with Volkswagen coming second. There's room for improvement in India, which is something important to note. Back in the market analysis, we mentioned something about Toyota going into India and making a 3-wheel vehicle, which is the Tata. Next slide, please.
So their capability, surprising to no one viewing this presentation, is that Toyota functions as the largest car manufacturer in the world. In addition to that, Toyota has many skills. In 1961, they adopted throughout the company the Toyota Quality Control System. They also use integrated quality and lean manufacturing production system. Toyota's production system has 2 components, Jidoka and just-in-time. Just-in-time is the Kanban Kaizen philosophy. Toyota spends a high amount of capital on R&D to offer innovative safety features. Kaizen is the heart of the Toyota production system. Kanban is the inventory flow control system that that indicates when parts are ready to be transferred to the production process. It eliminates waste, improves quality, imports value into the value chain as they're manufacturing. Next slide, please. So the human resources, Toyota employed some 369,000 people in 2018. And just a little interesting note there, they do a company-wide skills competition to increase and improve workmanship skills. Competition breeds excellence, and that's how they use it. Next slide, please. Toyota is financially healthy. Kara just went over this. They have a low and declining leverage due to high cash flow. They have a high and increasing capital. And they do have rising debt, but it's relationally acceptable because they have the equity to offset their debt, making their leverage acceptable. Next slide, please. Physical resources. So Toyota sales are dependent on international sales, and Toyota has a vast integrated network of manufacturing and distribution locations. This is important. Japan is an island. They're running out of space. So they're dependent on international sales. While physically limited in Japan, they already have a network of manufacturing and distribution globally. So they do have room to grow in already established manufacturing and distribution locations. Next slide, please. Technological resources. Prius was the first hybrid to come out. They have hybrid electric and gas engines to reduce emissions and gas consumption. They have the Mirari, the fuel cell car. So they have fuel cell technologies for gas independent vehicles. They have a mobility service platform that uses human connected service. This is like OnStar, except for it's a little more than that. And I'll get into that when we go into the implementation strategy. The mobility service platform is basically, it's like a integrated concierge service, which links the car, the driver, the dealers, insurance, navigation, all together in one integrated system within their vehicles. And then they have their TPS system that uses just-in-time processes that can build several different models on one platform. So they don't have to have independent processing systems for each one of their models. They can build multiple models on one system. Next slide, please. So this is Toyota's strengths and weaknesses. They have a robust investment in R&D. They have a strong quality system in manufacturing production process. They have extensive production and distribution network. And they have strengths with joint ventures. They have joint ventures in China with GAC and FAW. SoftBank is an information technology company that they're using to create and reinvent their mobility platform. And Suzuki, which is present in India, because they are the controlling owners of Maruti. Their weaknesses is that they have product recalls after 2010 affected their image. They have weak marketing capabilities in China because of cultural issues. And Toyota does not currently produce 2- or 3-wheeled vehicles, which are needed to penetrate India's market. Next slide, please.
Okay, so in 2009, Toyota received a lot of backlash and criticism due to their delayed response times to many safety issues and recalls. At that time, they decided to implement a new organizational structure. At this time, they were still based in, they are based in Japan, headquarters in Japan, and they made all the decisions at the headquarters in Japan. The business units were lacking in communications with each others, and they had to relay all communications through headquarters. At this time, they decided to do the Toyota company hierarchy, which was implemented in 2013. That consists of the global hierarchy, geographic divisions, and product-based divisions, which ultimately helped Toyota save their sales. Next slide, please. Okay, so for global hierarchy, Toyota still maintains its global hierarchy, but it has decided to give regional leaders more decision-making power. So people can make, sales presidents or of that region can make decisions based on the market that they are serving. So the U.S. sales president can make decisions specifically catered to the U.S. The China sales leader can make decisions specific to China. While regional leaders are able to make their own decisions now, they still do have to report back to headquarters in Japan. Next slide. All right, so in the new structure, it consists of 8 different regional divisions: Japan, North America, Europe, East Asia and Oceania, China, Asia and Middle East, Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Having different geographic regions allows Toyota to make the decisions specific to the region. And again, they're still required to report back to the headquarters in Japan. Next slide. So the product-based divisions, they support development of the brands and the product lines. They consist of Lexus International, which is a part of Toyota. Toyota number 1 is responsible for operations in North America, Europe, and Japan. Toyota number 2 is responsible for operations in the 5 other regions, and the unit center, which is responsible for engine, transmission, and other related operations. Next slide. So the Toyota company hierarchy allows for a lot more flexibility, and you've seen positive results from this new structure that they implemented. Again, the regional leaders can make the decisions. This allows the company to respond quickly to any issues that may arise without having to depend or run back to tell the headquarters in Japan. They can make those decisions a lot more quickly. Despite the reduced control of headquarters, Toyota is still very resilient to challenges that may come around. They have found themselves successful with this new hierarchy. Next slide, please. All right, so Toyota has 28 different production locations. I'm sorry, they're located in 28 different countries with over 53 manufacturing companies overseas. The production locations are Japan, US, France, Poland, Turkey, UK, China, Taiwan, Malaysia, Thailand, Kenya, South Africa, Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Venezuela, and Oceania. While most of the production does take place in Japan, you can see that most sales come from the United States. The United States produces 30% of sales, while Japan produces only 24% of sales. Having so many different production locations has its pros and cons. While they're not shipping vehicles overseas, it can be cost beneficial. However, they could be spending those funds by operating so many production locations. Next slide, please. Right here just shows the multiple production locations overseas. Next slide. This map is from 2012. However, it is still relevant. The only thing to note here is that they increased production in China. So they still have the plants in China. They increased production by 240 automobiles. I'm sorry, 240,000 automobiles. Next slide, please. There are over 20 research and development labs for Toyota. Coordination and integration is done by Toyota for all the development phases. They do not rely on any outside sources. Basic research, forward-looking, and leading-edge development and product development are the 3 stages of R&D. Here it's important to note that operating 20 different research and development labs can be challenging due to there being so many different opinions from so many people high up in that department of Toyota. Next slide, please. And here are the locations of the research and development labs. It's far less than the production areas. Located in Japan, North America, Latin America, Europe, Africa, Asia, China, and Oceania. All right, here's our goals hierarchy. If you recall from lecture 3, Dr. Ronnie noted that in order to move up in the goals hierarchy, you have to have successfully completed the previous level. So for acceptable risk, Toyota has no risk. They are doing just fine when it comes to risk. For financial results, they have achieved superior financial results. I think just in the last year, they had 28 billion in sales, which was far up from what they had been before. So we're currently at the 3rd step of the goals hierarchy. And with the sanctions going on and stuff and the different culture between China and Japan, they're looking to seek higher shares of markets in China and possibly in the U.S. And we said they do have a high share market in the U.S., but we're referring to sales of different vehicles, so sales of different trucks or, you know, new vehicles like the EV. Some of the long-term goals would be going into India, getting the three-wheel vehicles, mastering the EVs, and the AVs, or having higher sales of EVs than AVs, AVs being autonomous vehicles. Next slide, please.
So some of the Toyota financial goals, looking for that, setting a standard of success, obviously increasing sales. We want to increase operating profit margin, return on it, return on investments, and return on equity. So these are ways that Toyota can do better. You can do the next slide.
What's the dotted line?
The dotted line separates
Yeah, there
the
we go.
actual from the forecast. And the forecast on the solid line is the data that came from Value Line, which are professional financial advisors. And then because we are setting a standard for success with our goals, that's the red dotted line.
Okay, so in your view, the goals need to be, in the case of ROI, higher than Value Line prescribed.
Yes. So with ROI, it needs to be better going forward to be a true standard of success with relation to interest rates, right? So if they're borrowing at 5 and they're getting 8, you're only netting 3%.
There we go. That's what I wanted to hear. 8% return on invested capital isn't very attractive if a good rate on borrowings is 5%. That's not a very good margin. So you've prescribed something over 9%, approaching 10%, and that looks a little more reasonable for goal setting purposes.
I'd like to be closer where that Pfizer was at 15.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So we've covered, capital's good, equity good. The leverage down in the sweet spot still. Would like them to, so Value Line had them dropping down real deep in 2020 for leverage and then working its way back up. And that's still in the acceptable range. So we left that. The one thing to bring attention to is for long-term debt. So Toyota, Value Line had Toyota borrowing many more millions, which you have to spend money to make money. So we all understand that, right? We're all business. But the long-term debt, the return that we're getting from doing that, it may not be as a goal of success that we would want for Toyota as a team. So we did lower the long-term debt. That's just a colored visual representation of what our goals. So we want to increase our sales, increase our profit margin, and return on investments and equity, and decrease our leverage slightly, but still, keep it in that 30 to 40 range.
I think it's worth talking about the strategic objectives just a bit. Over a 5-year period, you're contemplating a fairly modest growth in sales of only 8.5% over 5 years. We would hope that Toyota's management can do better than that. We see that debt even when you have moderated it, is going to grow 31%, and that equity is going to grow just about the same, and that's okay, but we'd kind of like to see just a little improvement in that. It's unfortunate that when we look at the return on invested capital, Value Line sees an increase to 8%, which really isn't terribly attractive financially. But the leverage is beautiful. It's just right. What's quite remarkable is that with leverage of 34% or 35%, one would assume that Toyota could be a lot more aggressive strategically than this table, which is taken from the Value Line data, but more aggressive than this table suggests they're going to be. Okay.
So our market goals for Toyota, we want to increase our presence in the growing market of India, increase the market in for China, and then there's a joint venture with FAW. Continued leading automotive choice in the United States, implement new technologies, so with the hybrids, there's an enhanced Prius, continue the Toyota's sustainability efforts. The distribution centers will increase the numbers across the world, really. Offer unique new across market segments to increase the profit margin, and then achieving a global margin position as to continue to be the value leader of the industry. So, for example, exploiting TPS to lower the cost and increase profit margins. So, which, you know, as the note says, may enable some price reductions in the competitive markets. So strategic objectives, right? So customer service, so customer responsiveness, identifying the needs and the unmet needs of customers before their competitors. Toyota, known for their high efficiency and high value, reducing so that they have low cost, product differentiation, so having superior quality and features, superior dealers and services, and design innovations, so moving forward with the changing market. And of specific note, these are the building blocks of competitive advantage, which has made Toyota as successful as it is.
Somebody.
All right, so this is me. So here we discuss Toyota's production system. It's used to effectively organize and manufacture, organize manufacturing and logistics just in time, which is part of Kanban, refers to using only what is needed, when it is needed, and how it is needed. Jidoka is the automation of human touch, or with human touch. The production system consists of two parts: continuous improvement and respect for people. Continuous improvement refers to the challenging, creating the long-term vision and meeting those challenges. Kaizen, which is continuously improving business operations. And Jinchi Genbitsu, which is to get the facts involved in decision-making and going to the right source. Respect for people refers to understanding one another and building mutual trust. This also goes back to the production, where I mentioned something about it being difficult to run so many production labs. This part kind of helps alleviate some of that. And teamwork to stimulate personal and professional growth. And here we have Ansov's growth matrix. So just to go over it part by part, to the existing products in the existing markets, Toyota can strengthen their relationships with dealerships. They can support dealerships a little bit more. The existing market with new products, we talked about the EV vehicle and the Toyota Mirai. for new markets and the existing products, they can go into India and with their existing products. Furthermore, also going down to the next block for new market and new industry, they can introduce the three-wheel vehicles. They can start to do forklift attachments, which will come up later as one of their companies that they have done the acquisition of, and they can focus on safety features and other functions such as navigation or something similar to OnStar. All right, so here's the capabilities development. Premier Plus 10 focuses on new competencies in the current industries. So here we have the Prius Hybrid, Panasonic, which is a company that they're doing a partnership with or joint venture with for batteries of the autonomous vehicles, the BMW Alliance, Design Engineers, and their luxury model cars, which is the Lexus. For the mega opportunities, which is the new industry and new capabilities, they focused on their diversification, which goes into housing, boats, Toyota Bio Indonesia, which I will explain later, Toyota IT, eToyota, and again, forklift attachments. For fill in the blanks, that refers to the parts that they want to, basically a need that they need to satisfy for other people. So the joint venture with Panasonic, again, the batteries for the autonomous vehicles, enhanced dealer network, and the processing engineering of Kanban and Kaizen and quality control, and the Toyota Finance subsidiary, which is also one of their diversification areas. For new industry with existing capabilities, we go back to India, which is the three-wheeler cars, and they can do an alliance with Mahindra & Mahindra, which is a similar to Tata, one of the three-wheel vehicles. Toyota is far more concerned with vertical integration. They are in the business of production of automobiles and gaining components from external producers, more so than doing acquisitions of other type of businesses. They lead to greater efficiency through lower cost, stable and reliable supply of components, and eliminates the threat of bargaining power.
Good.
Thank you. Some companies that they've done horizontal integration with or acquisitions. Lexus is a horizontal integration, is one of their companies who they own. Scion, which is a retired brand, which is now owned by, well, they run under Toyota now, but the brand no longer exists as Scion. They still do sell Scion cars though. Hino Ottawa Jataniyu, a Japanese manufacturer of commercial vehicles that was acquired October 2010. Daihatsu, the small market cars, acquired February 2016. Cascade Corporations, which is the forklift, which I mentioned something about just before, acquired in March 2013.
Let it be known that Cascade is a prior consultant of the, prior client of the course instructor.
And to top that off, he did not know Toyota bought that company out.
That's right. This
So
I got educated.
Okay?
I got educated by this team.
That's right.
It surprised me. I fell off my chair when I saw this. Here we go.
Okay, so the Toyota pyramid, it consists of alliances. These are the companies that help them put the cars together and a bunch of other production and manufacturing stuff. It consists of 234 primary part suppliers and 77 production equipment manufacturers. Some of them are controlled directly by Toyota, while others still operate on their own, just with Toyota. Next slide. All right, so these are some of the joint ventures that Toyota has done over the years. In the beginning of the presentation, we mentioned something about NUMMI with General Motors. With NUMMI, Toyota and General Motors decided to work together. Toyota wanted to come into the United States, and GM needed assistance with manufacturing cars and learning how to do lean manufacturing. So together they created NUMMI. Toyota came into the United States. GM learned some skills from Toyota. In roughly 2021, Toyota and Mazda will launch a joint venture in Alabama, which is capable of manufacturing 300,000 cars a year. Just a couple of slides ago, I mentioned something about Panasonic. They have a pending joint venture with Panasonic, which should be approved by the end of 2020. And here they've developed automotive prismatic batteries for EVs, and prismatic is a cell battery. Next slide. Okay, so related diversification is financing. Toyota does in-house financing through dealerships and through the company as a whole. Some of the unrelated diversification, Toyota has branched off into the housing market, communications, biotechnology, afforestation, which is forest and stuff, environmental energy, marine business, and forklift attachments, again, which cascade. Next slide.
Amazing.
And this is just a visual representation of where Toyota has gone. I think the important thing to notice here is the time periods and how you see how Toyota has branched off into the years. If you look to the far left, they even gone into wellness, Good Life Design, which is kind of like their health diversification. They've gone into aerospace, business, engineering, marine, biotechnology. They have quite a few actually. Next slide. I'm sorry, that was of 2011 as well. All right, so these are actually some of the business titles that they have gone into. Some of them are self-explanatory, such as Toyota Financial Services Corp. Again, that's the one that does the in-house lending. They offer other loans as well and other financial services, but they're most known for auto loans. The Roof Garden, Going Green, so they focus on greenhouses and how they can be environmentally friendly. Toyota Housing Corp, they expanded their business into condominiums and rental properties. Toyota Bio Indonesia, they're searching for energy corps with high productivity in tropical regions. Next slide.
All right. So, what work do we need to do to implement this strategy? So we have to acquire some new skills and resources. In India, Toyota has to break in, surprise, surprise, to the 2- and 3-wheel market. In India, Toyota does have Toyota Kirloskar. It's a 4th largest producer of automobiles, not 3 wheels, automobiles. It's important to note, as we know, Tata is the leader, and that is the leading vehicle in India. But Toyota Kirloskar does give them a presence in the Indian vehicle market. Toyota has also done a partnership with Suzuki. Suzuki, as I said earlier, is the controlling partner, the controlling entity of Maruti, which is an Indian company. This will enable Toyota and Suzuki, Maruti, who happens to be the 3rd largest producer in India, to not only sell cars or produce cars in India, but they're going to share. Toyota's giving Suzuki the hybrid technology. And in that partnership, Suzuki gets the hybrid technology, Toyota gets another entry point into India, and they have agreed to each sell the other's products, vehicles. Next slide, please. In China, the growth market of today, Toyota has a joint venture with GAC and FAW. Recently, they have both GAC and FAW agreed with the government to produce more Toyotas in China. They actually have agreed to increase their production by 35% in China, which will have them producing 2 million vehicles. The next one on there is Toyota and Singulato. Singulato is a startup company, and they want to sell electric vehicles, gas-independent vehicles. So Toyota is giving this startup company their electric vehicle technology. What Toyota gains from this is a couple things. So China government gives out green car credits. Toyota is going to get those for the cars that Singulato manufactures. Also, Toyota gets insight into how businesses are built in China, similar to what they did with NUMMI in the US. Next slide, please. So the AI and EV, AI is what's going to drive the autonomous vehicles, and EV is the electric vehicles. So Toyota is a leading manufacturer of electric EV technologies. That's why they're So many companies are trying to partner with them for their stuff. They did partner with Panasonic to develop a new battery, as was said earlier. The partnerships to share new technology, I kind of went over briefly with Suzuki and Singulato, FAWGAC. But here we have a partnership with SoftBank. SoftBank is an information technology company. They also own telecommunications. They are partnered with Toyota to do their MSPF platform, which is their mobility service platform. This partnership is going to improve the probability of them creating an autonomous vehicle. 5G technology is what has been determined that will allow cars to autonomously drive on highways and share information quickly and in more real time. And SoftBank being a huge having a huge telecommunications division and having information technology is going to help Toyota access this technology and put it into their cars. Next slide, please. Organizational structure changes. So Toyota already has an established worldwide network of regional and national headquarters. They're present in every market, including China and India. For India, they need to invest in R&D to develop their three-wheel vehicles. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. What they do need to do is they need to continue to sustain their relationships in China and increase their partnerships, or increase their relationships so they can have their own partnership in China. They need to increase the R&D on electric and AI vehicle capabilities. This is just because of the trend to move toward gas-independent vehicles. And then their just-in-time production, Kaizen and Kanban. They need to continue this to lower cost, increase quality, and create more value so they can enter low-cost markets with viable options such as India. Next slide, please.
Jetta, you're doing it again.
Okay, sorry about that. So as you can see, Toyota has to have very, very strong leadership to achieve the goals and to implement this strategy. And they have created several division centers, different companies to do things to help with this strategy. One of the things that they've done, they've created a corporate strategy division, which is responsible for long-term strategy for ongoing growth. Specifically, a research center that is responsible for incorporating insight from the outside to create the technologies and businesses of the future. They've done a planning department, which is responsible for business innovation efforts. They've created an emerging market compact car company, which is really going to be responsible for bringing even more highly competitive cars based on Daihatsu's Motor Company's approach. And they have established an advanced R&D and engineering company specifically. And out of that, they established 4 vehicle-based companies. Next slide, I'm sorry. Specializing in compact cars, mid-size cars, commercial vehicles, and the Lexus brand. Next slide. So some of the major projects and programs that Toyota will be working on is electrification. They will be developing electric vehicles. They've established an EV business planning department and business and capital alliance with Mazda Motor Company. From 2020 onward, they're going to be launching ventures with the Chinese market, and by 2025, all models will have an electrified version. By 2030, at least 50% of all of their vehicles will be electrified, and of those, 10% will be battery electric or fuel cell. They're really working on their information and trying to connect their mobility services from data that they collected, like Gabe mentioned earlier about how you have the driver, the dealership, the insurance, and the road, the road, what's the word I'm thinking
We
of?
get it.
Okay, you get it. All right. Okay.
Flip.
They're also going to be working on automated driving and AI intelligence. And again, they're going to be developing a wide range of new mobility services. That's it. Next slide. And that's what I just talked about.
Okay.
So is Toyota accomplishing its mission? Yes, we think Toyota is. It's the leading car manufacturer in the world. It has a global network of manufacturers and dealers. It's present in all major markets. It's financially successful. It has sustainable practices. It's also a successful innovator of electrical vehicles and hybrid technology. How must Toyota alter its strategy? Toyota should keep doing what it's doing, but it should also seek for continuous improvement for sustainability. It should also strive for an increased effort for gas independence and more efficient electrical vehicles and hybrids. Toyota should also continue to improve its relationship with China. It should look for new mobility solutions for a growing Indian market. It could develop a set of competencies to produce low-cost, low-price cars. And finally, Toyota should pursue artificial intelligence and autonomous vehicles for increased safety and efficient propulsion usage.
Fantastic. Fantastic. That is my dog. Is that my dog?
That's Waffles.
That's Waffles.
That's Waffles look-alike.
That is exactly a look-alike.
Waffles is a golden doodle, right?
He's a golden doodle. Yes.
Yeah, that's Samantha. That's my parents' dog. She's also a golden doodle.
Oh, really? Well,
Yep.
then you're lucky that your parents are lucky.
Yeah.
Can you please transfer the control back to me? You just go down to the bottom of your screen and you will find something called users or something like that. Participants.
Manage participants.
Yes. And then you want to find me and shift it back to me if you would be kind enough to do that.
How do I do that? More. Oh, I made you the host.
You made me the host. Oh,
Yes, you're the host.
thank you. All right. What I'm going to do, first of all, I'd like to congratulate you. You actually got it done in enough time so that we did not have to split to a second recording. So that's just great. Let me see. Is there anybody in the audience still with us that would like to ask a question? I see Linda Weeks there. I see Paula. I see Glenn. Let's see, Scott. Anybody want to ask this team a question? Okay, just before we do then, let me stop the recording